Thank you, everyone who stayed. I know it's tough this late. Also, I had a really bad cold last week, so if I sound like a teenager, it is what it is. So I'm Rina, and welcome to Better Software Design with Mind Maps. And I've been a developer for over 15 years, and for the past year and a half, I've been at Dropbox. But the most important part of this slide is follow me, because I really love likes and claps, and just give me the love. OK, so a few years ago, I found myself in a very familiar situation. I was given fuzzy requirements for a really important feature that had to be done yesterday. And of course, it touches every single part of the code, right? And I panicked. So I sat down in front of a document, and I tried to get my thoughts out. And every time I wrote something down, another idea popped up, or something else that would be affected by the changes that I was going to make came into my mind, and I was scrolling up and down the document, not getting really anywhere. Software design is hard. How hard? 4 billion results on Google, 50,000 books on Amazon, hundreds of people that came here today. That hard. Software design is also creative. It's not a linear process. If we sit down and try to get it all into paragraphs and titles and subtitles right from the beginning, we're going to get it wrong. And we're going to work really hard in the wrong direction. So we have design patterns, tools, paradigms. All of those things aren't going to help us when we are faced with the real problem we have to start working on. Mind maps to the rescue. What are mind maps? Don't try reading that. That's the Wikipedia definition. I know what mind maps are, and I couldn't figure out anything from this definition. This is a mind map. The idea here is basically you take a subject, you put it in the center of the map, and you start throwing out ideas. Traditionally, each main subject gets their own color, and then, sorry, teenager, and then you branch out from each subject and just throw around your ideas. In the end, you get a map, a colorful map of your thoughts. It's a little hard to understand without a concrete example, so we're going to go and do that. Let's design Google. We're not going to design Google. Some of you may have thought that I would help you prepare for your next job interview, but I'm not going to do that today. Instead, I'm going to get my clicker to work. OK. I'm going to share with you an example that's based very, very loosely on a true story. Gali's ice cream shop. Gali is a, thank you. Gali is a successful businesswoman, and she has an excellent ice cream shop. She's making a lot of money, and one day, her accountant calls her, and he says, blah, 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 taxes, blah, 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 profits, blah, 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 accounts payable. Assume he said something that made sense, but that's what it sounds to normal people when accountants speak. Anybody here who's a developer doesn't know anything about that, right? We don't talk in jargon that nobody understands. This question has only one right answer. I hope you know it, right? Gali doesn't need Ghostbusters, she needs software. So she calls me, and she says to me, blah, 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 taxes, blah, 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 profits, right? And she says to me, I need my software to support being able to calculate how much ice cream I owe my customers. This is the ice cream debt. That's the way I have to report my taxes. And of course, her system doesn't support any of this. What does she have? She has one table. The table has one row, a plus row, positive row, for purchases, and one row, I'll explain everything later, and one row in a negative row for each ice cream that's eaten. So how does it look? It looks like this. There are 3 types of customers. The first type of customer is a one-time customer. This type of customer walks into the shop, pays for ice cream, eats ice cream. Yay! The way it looks is there's one row in the database for one ice cream bought for 15, and then one ice cream consumed with no sum because they didn't pay for eating, thank God. Next type of customer is a credit customer. This type of customer buys several ice creams in advance and prepays for them. So they would have a row for 10 ice creams for 110. It's cheaper, right, for if you buy in bulk. And then for each ice cream they eat, there's a negative row. No sum, -1. The third type of customer is a bulk customer. It's a large customer, like businesses or Gilmore Girls. And, and they buy in bulk. They don't buy a single ice cream cone. They buy a subscription for a few months. And so they pay for, let's say, $12,000 for 3 months. All the details are summed up in text because each customer like this gets their own custom deal. Okay, so what does ice cream debt mean? Let's say this customer bought 10 ice creams for 110. Each ice cream is worth 11. They've eaten 6 ice cream cones, and 4 are left. So we know that each ice cream cone is worth 11. We owe them 44. A bulk customer bought 3 months of ice cream for $12,000. Each month is worth $4,000. 2 months have passed. We're left with 1 month worth $4,000. Simple, right? I have one table, select sum, group by, I can get the number out. You have a question? Oh, sorry. Not simple. Real data is never this nice. Real data looks like this. This customer, same customer as before, bought 10 ice creams for 110. These ice creams are easy. We already saw the calculation. Each one of these is worth 11. This customer had a birthday. For their birthday, they got an ice cream bonus. 1 ice cream for no money. A little while later, there was a crazy promotion. 10 ice creams for 80. Anybody in their right mind would buy this, even if they still have prepaid ice creams that they haven't eaten yet. So now this ice cream, how much is it worth? Does it belong to the first purchase and is worth 11? Is it the free bonus birthday ice cream, or is it one of the ones that's worth 8 from the crazy promotion? I don't know. Does anybody here know? And remember those bulk customers? I don't have any data about what's going on with them. Everything is written in text, so there's nothing I can do with this. So at this point, I did what every good developer does, and I said, who's the idiot who did this? Okay, so I said in the beginning that this was based on, very loosely on a true story. The true story is obviously that I didn't work for an ice cream shop, life goals. I worked for a small company that was bought by a large corporation, and we had to take a system that had accumulated a lot of mess. Random bonuses, changes, refunds, unstructured data, and turn it into something that could be reported to an enormous corporation. And this is taxes. You want to get everything absolutely right. No edge case can escape. So back to the ice cream. And mind maps, because that's the subject of this talk, right? Mind maps are built to help us get our thoughts out. So what we do is the first thing we do is put the subject in the center of the map. Then we're going to start throwing out ideas. So the first thing is that I think about is the customer type, right? Because that's the main differentiator in our calculation. So we have 3 customer types: one-time, credit, and bulk. Each type of customer gets their own calculation. So one-time customers, they eat their ice cream, they don't have any credit debt. No debt. Credit are calculated pretty easily. We saw each ice cream gets their own worth, and then we just calculate the number of remaining credits. Bulk customers are calculated differently. They're called straight line. We take the number of days of their purchase, and we divide the sum paid of the number of days. It's okay if you don't get the details. The point here is to show the process. So if this was all we needed, there wouldn't be much point to design or software development in general, because this is easy. Edge cases are our livelihood. So what edge cases are there? We'll think about changes, things that can happen once they've bought their ice cream. So let's see. There could be Asa. Okay. So there could be refunds, mistakes, cancellations. And then suddenly I think, like, when are these changes happening? Before the ice cream was eaten, after the ice cream was eaten, maybe before the end of the month when I report to the accountant, after the end of the month. I don't know if this makes any difference, but I thought about it here. I'm not sure it fits in, but I'm just going to write it down. Not everything has to fit perfectly. The point here is to get stuff out. We're brainstorming. Even if we're doing this in a group, we can throw out ideas and put them on the map without interrupting the flow, because, again, we're not doing a linear process. We're just throwing stuff out. As long as it's written down, we're good. The next thing I think about is tracking. So I can put the data in a separate aggregated table for reports, or I can calculate on demand. This is something I have to think about. This is for taxes, so I need to be able to verify that the data that's coming out of the system is true. I once did an MBA, and in that, there was a course about accounting. And I seem to remember something that they said about how to calculate this type of thing. There are 2 methods. One is FIFO, is you take the earliest purchase and you use that to calculate the consumption that's happening now. The other option is LIFO, where you take the latest. I don't know which type of tracking to use. I need to talk to the accountant and get their answer. I don't have to make the decision right now. So I mark it with those dashed lines and a question mark. I can decide later. When I get to the point of writing my tech spec and making decisions, I can talk to whoever I need to talk to and make the right decisions. Again, the point here is getting stuff out, making sure that we don't miss anything. Write it all down. Now I remember that I have to deal with all that unstructured data. Migration, backfill. To be honest, I have no idea how I'm going to do that, and just thinking about it is giving me a headache. But it's something that has to be dealt with. So again, I write it down. There's no way I'm going to forget. It's written down. I can't avoid it. So I'm not quite done with the changes area. Because I thought about refunds, mistakes, and cancellations, but I haven't really thought about what that means for the system. So refunds, I need to think how I'm going to calculate them for one-time customers, credit, and bulk. Mistakes for one-time, credit, and bulk. And cancellations for, it's exactly the same. Okay. So something here feels wrong. I have repetition in my map. One-time credit in bulk appears multiple times. And in the area of the customer type, I have the customer types, and each one of them has only one child. When I was preparing this talk, I was asked, so what's wrong with that? And I said, I don't know what feels wrong. And I guess that's not the best, most useful answer. So I thought about it a little more, and I realized that this intuition comes from many years of developing and planning complex software. If you see repetition, you're doing it wrong. It's time to refactor. So that's what we're going to do with the map. We're going to refactor the map. So the abstraction that I decided to choose, I was supposed to say that on this slide. Okay. So the abstraction that I decided to choose is to take the customer type out of the map and use it as metadata. So I'm going to write it at the top of the map as a legend, right? And take it out of the map. All gone. So now I restructured the map to focus on the type of calculation that I need to make. The no debt ever, remaining credit, and payment divided by days is still the same, and I leave the name of the customer on the branches just for context. It's not my main consideration anymore. Now when I go back to the refunds, mistakes, and cancellations, I realize that basically I'm handling them all in the same way, depending on the type of calculation. So I remove them from the map as well and restructure this area. Basically what I'm talking about is returns. I don't really care what the reason is. If it's a one-time customer, no refunds. You've had your ice cream. If it's a bulk or a credit, then all I have to do is recalculate and give a partial refund if it's necessary. If the change has happened after I've reported it to the accountant, I need to fix the reports and add some changes. I'll figure that out later. Okay, at some point, we have to stop brainstorming. But how do we know when to stop? So a friend of mine suggested the popcorn model. When you make popcorn and you don't let the pot burn, like I've done multiple times, you listen for the pops to start going down. The rate starts going down, and that's when you know to turn it off. That's what we do here. When the rate of ideas goes down, we stop, and it's time to go on to the next stage. So we've seen that the mind map is done at a very high level, mostly keywords, catchphrases, and no details. And that's okay, because that's the point of that stage. If you go with a mind map to your manager, at best, you'll get a weird look. At worst, life sentence in Jira. None of us want that. Or maybe some people who don't work with Jira and know how horrible it is. So now that we have all of our subjects and all the things that we know we have to take into account, it's time to take our creative process and our beautiful map and turn it into a tech spec that we can actually work with. I like to keep the map open in front of me when I do this process for two reasons. One is it keeps the big picture in mind, and the other is that if there's a popcorn that hasn't popped yet, I can add it to the map at this point without interrupting my work on the tech spec. It doesn't mean that I have to stop what I'm doing and find the place it fits in the tech spec. I just add it to the map, it's in front of me, and I can deal with it later. This is my wonderful tech spec, starting to work on it. I didn't really need this slide, but I couldn't skip the opportunity for such a terrible pun. Scoop, scope, I don't know. We write scope at the top of every document. The first thing I'm going to do is take that legend that I put up before and turn it into a glossary. This gives our readers the context they need to understand the rest of the document. Okay, so basically I took that, I explained everything that I've said already a number of times here, and write it down. Next thing I'm going to focus on is the calculation, because everything else depends on it. So I'm going to take the calculation area. The first node is basically my main title. The next nodes are the subtitles. Anything under that can be bullets, paragraphs, depends on how detailed you're going to be. Okay, so again, this is my calculation. Obviously, if this was a real tech spec and I wasn't writing it by hand, then I would go into further detail. Now I'm going to go back and revisit the decisions that I have to make. I call the accountant and I say, okay, which method do you want us to use? He says FIFO, because otherwise we're going to have stale purchases in the system which stay open and active for too long. Then we might have a deal from 2007 that we still haven't used all of the credits for. These things actually happened, so this is really important. Here I explain what an active purchase is, how we're going to calculate it, and go into the technical details of how we're going to structure it in the table. Obviously, not here. Okay, so that's what we do for each node in the map. And in the end, we get a linear representation of all of those nonlinear thoughts that we had in the process. Okay, recap. Choose a weapon. First thing you need to do is to decide how you're going to build your mind map. There are lots of tools online. I don't think I know anybody who actually uses them. They're totally overkill. Sorry. For this, I used an iPad and a stylus, and it was amazing. Like, I had way too much fun doing that. But a whiteboard or Post-its or just, the drawing tools in PowerPoint are really the best solutions, because you want to keep it simple. If the tool gives too much work, then you're not going to be able to get ahead. The other thing is that we have to take into account refactoring. So we're going to need to move things around and erase them. So paper is usually not the best option. Next step is getting all of your thoughts out. So we remember our principles. It doesn't all have to fit perfectly. We can just throw things out and move them around later. You don't have to make decisions at this point. You just have to raise concerns. And you want to remember everything because you don't want to mess with taxes. The next thing is to organize your chaos. One of the power of mind maps is being able to make a mess. Okay? Sorry. I have to blow my nose. Once everything is out in the open, you can see patterns. You can see all those repetitions. All those things aren't in the right abstraction. And then you can refactor and get a clean, elegant mind map that has everything you need and nothing extra. Then you take that, each node, and turn it into titles, subtitles, paragraphs, and details. And that's it. You've got your tech spec. If you enjoyed this, if you're going to use it, I'd be really happy to hear. This is my handle on pretty much every social network except for Pinterest. And of course, you can talk to me after the lecture.